Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Friday morning, October the 8th, and I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com, and chat room is open if anybody's awake and wants to sit in there. And I've got some coffee. I'm trying to wake up here. Glad to be here and want to finish off the topic of anger. Excuse me, my voice is terrible. Just waking up. So, we were looking at, the last few weeks, really looking at anger, the shame-rage connection, and everything to do with, how much do we know about anger and how angry are we, right, with this website, www.angerresources.com, ANGERESOURCES.com. angerresources.com. It's a great website, all kinds of good information on there. You just get on there and look at the tools and resources, and there's lots of great stuff there from Dave Decker and Michael Obsatz, the two men who created the website and who are, who work with in that field, right? So it's good stuff. I'm learning a lot and getting a lot out of it. I hope you are too. And so we'll finish looking at this today. I don't know if we might continue on with some of it next week if I can. Like, some of it's really quite good. There's some awesome articles on there. I want to finish looking at the anger escalation process and all that. So I don't know if we'll be able to finish it today, but we'll certainly try. And so I'm not a professional counselor or therapist. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows, just to be one more voice out here talking about this stuff and just to be one more voice for survivors to say, hey, you're not alone, and to keep reaching out, keep looking for what's gonna help you on your healing journey, whether it's therapist or counselor or group support or calling a crisis line, whatever you have to do, to get yourself to a good place in your life, It's just so important because I'm a survivor of child abuse, and I've been working on my healing journey for a while now, and it's a great place to be where I'm at today. I would wish this for everybody, because almost 4 years ago, I was kind of contemplating self-injuring and was still considering, had suicidal thoughts, and, that had been going on for years. And so I'm in such a much better place these days, and it's really just because I began my healing journey and actually started to work on it and became very kind of proactive about it. But I didn't, I haven't gone to see any therapists or counselors or anything like that. I have talked to a few counselors and whatnot, but I haven't had any therapy. But the thing is, I've done a lot of self-help and really looked around to see what's out there, and, just been very much positive about the whole thing, and changed the way I felt about myself, and that was the biggest aspect of my healing journey, I think, was just changing the way that I felt about myself, right? I couldn't change the way that my parents treated me like so many years ago. Couldn't change the past, right? But I realized that I could change the future. I could change the way I felt now, and I could work on changing my future, the outlook for my future, right? Which wasn't looking very good 4 years ago. So that's the whole issue. We have to be very proactive, and we have to do whatever we have to do to get help, right? It is truly our responsibility as adults in the situation. Help just doesn't come and knock on the door and say, hello, I'm here to help you. We have to reach out. And when I started reaching out, I couldn't believe how many hands came back to me to say, hey, you can do it. That's a very, very awesome feeling, let me tell you, to have that support. And so I appreciate all my friends who have been here for me the whole journey, and everybody who's just been in my life for the last year or so who's been really supportive, awesome, awesome friends, and I really consider them my family, right? So, it's just an amazing place to be. So I would wish that for everybody. So, I'm not a professional, so you have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about everything to do with abuse on my shows, right? Child abuse and adult survivor issues and even, domestic violence, sexual assault, you name it. So the show topic material is quite often very sensitive, and you have to know where you're at in your healing journey when you're going to listen to stuff like this, like any program like this, talking about these types of issues. If you think the show might bother you, you have to turn it off, right? It's your responsibility, your discretion. So you have to listen at your own discretion, because you don't want to go backwards in your healing. You want to move forward at a slow and steady pace, what's comfortable for you, right? So if you're listening to my show and it makes you uncomfortable, you have to turn it off. Do the right thing. You can always come back and listen another time. Like, the archives will be here if you ever wanted to pop in and listen to them, right? Otherwise, don't worry about it. You just it's better for you to be safe and keep yourself safe, and which means you won't hurt somebody or yourself because of, an emotional breakdown or something from listening to certain things. Because I'm telling you, I'm a survivor. I know about this stuff, right? So you have to be very careful. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have someone listen to the show with you, because there's a lot of adult content on here, mainly just talking about abuse. And abuse is not talked about in mainstream society. And so, we witness abuse on TV every day. Just about every program will have some abusive thing going on in it. But that's TV. That's like in a person's mind, that's TV, that's not reality. That's the movies, that's the video games, that's not reality. But actually, in truth, it is reality. And so many people live and spend their lives like that. So, but it's not talked about mainstream, right? It's all just made a game out of, or some sort of fantasy world, when in actuality, violence affects so many people around the world and so many children, right? So it's not a game, it's reality, but it's not talked about mainstream. So you never hear much about it. You just see the reports in the paper about the children, in the headlines, who have been abused at the hands of their parents or caregivers or someone in the home or someone, a stranger or whatever. And, they're either dead or they're in the hospital due to the abuse that they've suffered, or we just don't hear about them at all, and they're just not reported. So this is the sad part. So that's why I wanted to be one more voice, And so if you're under the age of 18, you just make sure that you have someone listen to the show with you that's older, an adult, and that way they can help you make the decision whether you should be listening to it or not. And really, because I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're standing up to fight to save children's lives, and we care. So that's the whole issue. And I can't, you would be doing yourself a favor and me a favor if you would get an adult to listen to the show with you, to make sure it's cool and it's something that you should be listening to, right? So we'll get right into the material here. angerresources.com. We were looking at yesterday morning. We were talking about this. It's like a scale of how angry and hostile are we, right? It's an anger index, and we went through almost all the questions. We got almost to the end there, and you're supposed to score these questions. Like there's 36 questions, I believe, total. 36 questions, and you're supposed to scale them on a scale system of 0 for for the last 30 to 36 for 0 for often, 1 for some of the time, 2 for rarely, 3 for never, right? So as we're going through reading these questions, if you go to this website, www.angerresources.com, you can find this anger index and do these questions yourself, and you can find out just how angry you are, or just how where you fit on the scale of anger and hostility, right? So I think it's quite interesting, and I've really enjoyed doing these pre-tests and this anger index thing here, because the questions are really quite good. They do make you think about your life and how you handle yourself when something comes up that's very stressful and could cause you to become angry. Like where do you fit into the whole scale, sort of thing. It does make you think about your behavior. It makes me think about my behavior, the way that I used to behave, the way I behave now. It's quite different, which is good, which is a good thing, right? It's very positive, but for some people, they're still sitting in this anger, this pool of anger and hostility, right? And that's a bad place to be, for everyone around you as well as yourself. And I know that I was there years ago, and most of my friends were like that. So we were like a hotbed of anger, we were just like a volcano, just spilling over all the time. And in our personal lives, it's not like we were just showing off in front of people. I mean, me and my friends would get together, and sit around quite often at the park or wherever, just walking down the street. We'd be talking about how angry we were, because the things that were going on in our home, things that were in our homes were just horrible. And I kind of wrote about that in my new book, and it's just a short story, but it's a book, The Levita Juvies, and it's really a story about my friends and myself. And one summer that we were hanging out together, we hung out many summers, but that was just the one particular summer that I wanted to sort of talk about and bring awareness to teens. So many teens are suffering with abuse and substance abuse issues, anger and violence in their homes, and I just wanted to bring that to light, and hopefully teens will get something out of it and be able to recognize that stuff and realize it's abuse, right, and to make sure that they get some help. It's very important. So that's the thing. But this is just it, anger affects everyone, and anger is a normal, like a natural response, but it's how we allow it to, it's how we control it, how we manage it. It's like if we don't manage anger at all and we just we just hurt people. Well, we're just abusers. So that's the whole issue with anger, right? That's abusers, who, like my parents, for instance, had they gotten some anger management, counseling when I was growing up, I can imagine a lot of the abuse would have not have happened because they just had some huge anger management problems, right? So, it would have been great to see them get some help. So many people need help with this. And if we don't get help, then we're just abusive and we're just abusers, right? And because when you're hurting someone, you're abusing them, really, and that's not right. It's not right to do that to somebody just because of how we're feeling, right? So that's why it's so important for people, to make sure that you get some help with your anger management issues, so that you don't hurt yourself or somebody else, right? But we left off right close to the end there. I left off talking about question 34. I try to focus on the good things that I have going in my life, and I was just talking about that. I definitely do try to focus on the positive. You know what I mean? If you focus on the negative all the time, especially dealing with what I'm doing, trying to stop child abuse, you can be really bummed out all the time and really angry and stressed out, and and even dealing with my survivor issues, I could really let that get me down. And actually, what I've done is become very proactive and turned it around the other way. And so instead of just looking at all the bad stuff, which is what I was doing 4 years ago, now I'm looking at the positive stuff a little bit more and saying, hey, you know what, we can do this, and getting very proactive, So this is the thing. I sort of changed my focus. I changed the way I was looking at things, right? Question 35, I work hard to think about and understand why I react the way I do when I get angry. We're supposed to answer that like 0 for I'll give you the scale again. 0 for often, 1 for some of the time, 2 for rarely, or 3 for never. And the question was, I work hard to think about and understand why I react the way I do when I get angry. And so, like now, I would say often, and actually, a long time ago, I would say probably rarely. I knew why I was angry when I was growing up, right? I didn't have any problem with that, right? I knew why I was angry because of the abuse that I was suffering at home, and not only that, but just witnessing my parents' domestic violence and abuse, and witnessing my brothers, going downhill. And one of my brothers was murdered when I was a young kid. And I had a lot of anger towards, I said I was going to kill the person who killed him, and that was, killing and death was like part of my life, you know what I mean? When I was a kid, I was going to kill the person who killed my brother. I used to sleep with a knife just in case somebody tried to kill me, which was mainly my dad, but I was kind of thinking it could be my mom, because the two of them were threatening everybody's lives, right, not just mine. And I was, death and killing was just sort of something that I had in my mind since I was a kid. So, I thought, when I find the person who kills my brother, I'm going to kill him. And then at night I'd sleep with my knife in my bed thinking, nobody better try to kill me as far as my parents go, because it won't be me that'll go, it'll be them, right? So that was my protective measure, right? But the thing is it's a hard way to grow up at the age of 7, 8 years old, you know what I mean? 8 years old, 9 years old. And, I knew why I was angry as a young person, right? So I didn't have to think about why I was reacting the way I was reacting, because it was just my life, you know what I mean? But then later, as I got older, I started to think, man, I really should try to tone down my anger and try to behave myself if I want to keep a job, because I don't have anybody to support me. I never, when I was growing up, I couldn't really rely on my parents for money because they didn't have any money, and so and not that they would have been able to give it to me anyway, or would have wanted to. My mom was sometimes passing me $20 here and there. She wasn't wouldn't give me anything. But the thing is when I started working, I got 3 jobs and was busy working and paying off a car, and then I got in a car accident and ended up around, I don't know, quite a bit in debt, tens of thousands, almost 20,000 probably. And at a young age, 18 years old, so I had to pay that off, pay my doctor off, and go to therapy for my ankle, physical therapy and all this, rehab and all this. And so it cost me a fortune, and so I realized that if I wanted to keep jobs, I was going to have to behave myself, right? Because I had to have these 3 jobs to pay off this debt, right? And quite often I was so angry that I'd be cursing at my bosses and quitting my jobs, and I started to realize that, hey, if I want to keep my jobs, and I don't want to get, have to quit because I'm going to injure somebody or whatever, then I better straighten up my behavior. So I did start working on it a long time ago, right? But I still had some issues with it, and even today, if somebody gets in my face, I don't mind protecting myself. You know what I mean? It's like I'll get right back in their face, but I do try to be a little bit more respectful now, whereas before I was just not very respectful. So I do a lot more thinking about it now than I did back then. About what causes me to be angry and why I react the way that I do. Right? So it's important to take a look at that stuff. Right? Question 36. I think people can be forgiven for what they do, even if it hurts others. Now, that's a really good question, especially coming from a survivor, right? I mean, I think people can be forgiven for what they do, even if it hurts others. Well, I think forgiveness really, people always say, how could you forgive your parents? You know what I mean? That's a question I get quite a bit, because I have written my memoirs, and, I did have to forgive them, but I had to forgive them for myself. It wasn't for them. You know what I mean? And not a lot of people, it's hard to understand that. But it's like, if I didn't forgive them for myself, then I was just going to self-destruct, because that was the whole issue. Is I had so much anger and hatred in my heart towards them for what they did. Not really not at them. I didn't hate them. I hated what they did. And so in order to kind of move past that, I had to forgive them. And I realized that, hey, I want to be forgiven too, right? So I thought, man, I better forgive them and move forward, right? Do I condone what they did? Absolutely not. And I don't condone abuse of any kind, so from anybody, including myself. I just don't condone abuse. I just think it's so wrong. And so, I had to forgive, right? So so question 36, I think people can be forgiven for what they do, even if it hurts others. I would say I'm still working on that, but I've come a long, long way. So I would say often, now. Years ago, of course, that wouldn't have been the case. I would have said never. You know what I mean? So, because years ago it was like no forgiveness. I was just bent on the fact that I was so upset with what had happened in my childhood and what my parents did to each other and us, right? And I've seen and other things that people have done to me, friends or whatnot that, that I just thought I could trust, and really I thought they were like my sisters, like my family, and they. A few of my friends screwed me over royally, and I just don't want to have anything to do with them now. Do I forgive them? Yeah, I have to, right? Otherwise, that'll just eat me up, right? It'll just tear me up. So it's almost forgiveness that it's hard to explain it, but for me, I did it for myself, right? And, that sounds selfish. But you know what? I had to in order to stay alive, right? In order to stay, focused on my healing journey and not be thinking, going back to the same way that I was feeling before, I had to make some peace. So in order to do that, I had to kind of say, okay, all right, I'm gonna forgive them and then move on. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, I'm going to stay in this pit of misery and anger and hostility, right? And being angry really all the time. And most people wouldn't have recognized it because it was so far down inside my heart. It was killing me. Like I was fine on the outside, for many years. But inside was this huge rage, this huge anger, rage thing going on, right? And it was literally destroying me. So that's the whole issue. It's very, very hard and damaging on a person. So in order for me to heal, I had to do that. But, that's everybody has to do. You have to know yourself what's good for you, right? And eventually everybody, I figure, if you look hard enough and you search for it long enough, you'll find it. But you have to do the work on it, So then after we're done with the questions, that's all the questions. What you do is you total up your score, right? So you go to this website, www.angerresources.com. You can take this anger pretest and then this anger index thing. And whatever the score is, that's where you find where you're sitting as far as anger goes. And they said 0 to 18 points, you probably know yourself pretty well and are able to handle your anger when it comes up in your day-to-day life. And 19 to 40 points, you've got some danger points where your anger has the potential to cause problems for you. And 41 points or higher, you're likely to become angry and hostile frequently and need to find better ways to handle your anger and the thoughts and actions that it triggers. So I didn't score my own score on the points, right? But I'll probably go back and do that. But it's quite interesting. You can kind of see where you fit in there just by answering those questions on that anger index, right? So it's pretty cool. And I want to look at next, which they have some awesome stuff on here, awesome articles. And I want to look at this next one, which is the anger escalation process, right? And this is kind of what leads up to an explosive anger situation, right? Written by Dave Decker, right? The anger escalation process. And I just want to read what he has to say here. It says, explosive and disrespectful anger does not just erupt out of nowhere, quote unquote. It says even though that's what many angry people feel and describe to others, after an angry episode, you might have been thinking to yourself, I was feeling fine and then I just reacted, or my day was great and then I just blew up. But that isn't quite the reality, he says here. He says, in fact, explosive anger arises as a result of an escalation process. An escalation is a gradual buildup of emotion and tension over a period of time, and an explosion is the end result. So it says some people escalate to drinking too much, eating too much, or getting depressed. People who tend to react to stress by getting angry get explosive and rageful. An escalation may last minutes, hours, days, weeks, and even months. It involves specific cues or triggers that it can include brooding over past hurts and resentments, reacting to current situations and people, and any and all feelings, right? So, I mean, I can totally relate to this. This sums up me, you know, and it's just, you know, that's just what I was doing for many, many years. You know, just not dealing with things right and not handling things properly as an adult, you know, especially through my 20s and 30s. Got a little bit better in my 30s, but still had some serious depressed states, you know, and wasn't all that I didn't think I was angry, but I had a lot of rage inside, right? But I was just brooding, you know, continually brooding over past hurts and resentments. So this is like totally what I can relate to this completely. And, you know, it's because I was taught how to do that. My mom was always brooding. My dad was always brooding, and my dad still broods, you know what I mean? But he broods over his own situation, not the family's. He doesn't care what he did to his children or his wife, right? And he doesn't take responsibility for it. But what he broods over is his own condition, right? He broods over the fact that, oh, he's this and he's that, and he's got this disease and he's this and that, which he doesn't. But he's mentally ill. He's borderline schizophrenic, right? So he thinks he's got all this stuff wrong with him, and yet he two of his sons lie in a grave, one to suicide, and one from a drug overdose. And they would have loved to be here right now, I'm sure of it, had they gotten some help, but they killed themselves. Too bad. But, I mean, to be in his position at the age of 90, he's actually in really good shape. But his mind is, of course, has always been in really bad shape. So he's never been well, right? I don't think he's ever been well a day in his life. As far as his mental, you know, his mental capacity goes, right? He's very smart. He's an intelligent man. So I'm not talking about that. He's got psychosis. You know, he's borderline schizophrenic, which I think he's really more schizophrenic than borderline. Let me tell you. So I feel bad for him, you know. But you know, this is the thing, right? I mean, what he did by not getting help caused his family to be destroyed. You know, he was one of the key components to destroying the family, and you know, doesn't take any responsibility for it at all. And so, you know, he thinks mainly about his own situation. It's like, oh, poor me, woe is me. And I'm thinking, you know, it makes me mad because I'm like, well, how could you feel like that when you got two sons lying in a grave? Your wife has been passed away for 15 years, who you did not love, and mistreated your whole marriage. And your other son was murdered, and you're going to sit here and complain, woe is me, you know what I mean? So that's sort of, see, this is the thing, right? It's just these resentments and these hurts, right? I mean, some of it's still hanging around a little bit, you know what I mean? But I used to be extremely bad, you know, extremely, a lot worse. That's why I was contemplating ending my life, because I couldn't handle it, you know, until I decided to really start working on it, which was, you know, at the point where I decided to fight to live instead of fight to die, right? So that's the whole thing. But yeah, I completely relate to this stuff, and it's horrible. And I know so many people who have probably can relate to this too, you know, because they were abused as children as well. I know lots and lots of survivors. I have my whole life. So it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. It says anxiety, disappointment, and fear can be a part of an escalation just as much as anger can. So anxiety and disappointment and fear can be a part of an escalation just as much as anger can. See, and I think that's where a lot of people don't know, like I didn't really think about that, right? That, you know, even though I knew that's why I was explosive, and when I would finally get mad and something would just tip the scales, and I would just let everything out on one person who happened to be the poor recipient of my rage, right? Which was generally my sweetheart. Before we straightened our relationship out, you know, he would get the brunt of that, right, for this stuff that had been building up for, you know, years, and then he would be the lucky recipient of that. Well, I was the lucky recipient of my mom's rage like that. So that's the whole thing. It would build up, and then she'd just take it out on me. And so I was just doing what I was taught how to do. I was behaving completely like my parents, right? And so, we finally worked it out, and I have done a lot of work on it. But, in my 30s, through my 30s and into my 40s, right, with the anger stuff, right? It's hard. It's very hard. So there's often angry people have little, if any, awareness that the pressure is building internally, and have few, if any, skills to identify and handle the escalation in a productive and useful way. It says a key in handling anger more effectively is getting to know yourself. The more information you have about what is happening inside of you, for example, your thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and what you tend to react to that is happening around you, the better you will be able to recognize and intervene in an escalation to explosive anger. So, if we get to know each other, not to know each other, but to know ourselves, right, to really look in at ourselves, and I think that's what I've done. That's what I'm doing on these shows, really, is taking a good look at what's going on the inside. But I've actually always been quite aware of it because probably because I had to be just to stay alive, you know what I mean? I don't know what would make a person, maybe a therapist, psychotherapist and whatnot could figure that one out, but it's interesting. I don't know why, but I've always been quite aware of what's going on inside of me. I think that's why I did a lot of drugs. I wasn't ever going to do drugs because I saw what happened to my brothers when they were doing drugs, right? And I swore I would never do drugs, but I started doing a lot of drugs because I needed to get high. I just needed to be away, like to escape from the thoughts and the feelings that were coming at me all the time, because of what I was suffering in the home, and the violence and the anger and the hatred and the rage, right? And I think that, would I recommend that for anybody? No, I really needed help, right? I need drugs, I needed a therapist. I needed to get out of that home. I needed somebody to love me, and I needed somebody to care about me, right? And that's the sad part. I knew that even if I had died of a drug overdose, my parents wouldn't have cared. So I used to do a lot of drugs because I was thinking, I'll show you. I wasn't like I was necessarily trying to kill myself. I was just thinking, I knew my parents didn't care. And so, it was absolutely pathetic, right? So I thought, well, if I'll just finish the job, really. That was what was in my mind. I thought, you know what? They started me on this road of destruction and don't care. And so I'll finish the job for them. So I used to do massive amounts of whatever I could get my hands on. And so that really kind of blocked a lot of the thoughts and feelings that I had coming around for a period of time until I got off the drugs at the age of 21. Around 21 years old, somewhere in there, I decided to stop doing them because my brother committed suicide, and he was a cocaine addict, and I just could see myself going that way, And I thought, man, I don't want to do that. That's so bad, It was so painful to me to have that happen to me, and I thought, man, I don't want to do that, So I really decided I better straighten up and get a good life. Plus, it was getting out of control. It was just more and more heavy-duty drugs and more violence between my friends and myself, and a lot of problems, right? And I thought, I don't want to have a good life, right? So I started to realize I just wanted to have a normal life. I just wanted to be a normal person. I just wanted to be a normal woman, experiencing normal things that normal 21-year-old women would experience. And I thought, this is ridiculous. Look at the lifestyle I'm leading. And I was, without even really looking back at my childhood, I was just thinking of, look at this lifestyle I'm leading now, And then I got off the drugs and started to focus on just trying to get myself straightened out. It took me the better part of 5-6 years. So, this is the thing. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. And, it's taken me to this age to get where I'm at today, right? So it does. It takes as long as it takes, right? But I would hope that you would reach out and get some help because, man, I needed help a long, long time ago and never got any help, right? So whatever we have to do to get help, to get better, to have a better life, that's what we need to do, right? So we'll continue this on Monday, and have a great weekend, everybody. I'll be back on tonight as well. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And, of course, I'll be on Dreamcatchers Talk Radio at www.blogtalkradio.com/Dreamcatchers. I'll be on tonight with Donna Shear, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be bringing out the headlines and talking about child abuse prevention, awareness, and whatnot. And then I'll be on this weekend as well and next week. So if you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook, whatnot. Take care of yourselves and have a great day. Make sure you reach out. Don't suffer in silence. You do count. You do count. I don't care what anybody's ever told you before. You do count. You do matter. You matter to me. So I want you to just hang in there and get some help and stay on this healing journey, moving at your own, at your own speed, right? And, just keep reaching out, right? And don't give up. Never, ever, ever give up, right? That's very important. So we'll talk to y'all real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.